Okay, everybody, welcome to our tonight's webinar on community webinar on the Binyamin region. Before I introduce our panel, I'm just going to give a little rundown about what it is we're going to cover tonight. First of all, my name is Nata Katz, for whoever's not familiar. I am the manager of the Government Advocacy and Post-Aliyah Services Department at Nefesh B'Nefesh. We support Olim Post-Aliyah with any of their needs, whether it's logistical, answering questions, dealing with government bureaucracy. And the reason that I'm on this webinar is because I myself am a resident of the Binyamin region, as well as the rest of the panelists. And we're going to share a little bit about what the Binyamin region is, what the communities are in the Binyamin in the area, and so that you can learn if they are a fit for you. A couple of years ago at Nefesh B'Nefesh, we had a community fair where over 40 communities came to present their communities to Olim, to show them what it is that they offer and try to find a right fit for the people that joined the fair. And I remember that the social media manager was going around and interviewing each of the communities and asking them what it is that is so special about the yeshuv and why should people come there. And I remember everybody's answer so clearly. Everybody said exactly the same thing. The people are so amazing. So the truth is, thank God, the people are so amazing everywhere. But again, what is it that makes your community or my community a community that the people that are watching this webinar are going to want to join? So that's what we're here to learn. And especially now during a time where pilot trips are not currently a possibility and people can't just drive around or set meetings with people in various towns and cities. So these are, you can see them as virtual pilot trips. And we're going to try to cover what types of communities are here and what kinds of people live in these communities. And we're going to hear from representatives of these towns. So before we begin, just a couple of ground rules. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, there is a Q&A section either on the bottom or the top of your screen. You can click on that button and a window will pop up and you can ask your questions. We will be answering the questions throughout the webinar. The chat box is not for your questions. The chat box is for Josh Sussman, who is in the background. We'll be uploading links or helpful information. We'll be sharing email addresses and contact information. You should direct all of your questions to the Q&A section. So in order to continue this webinar, I'm going to introduce our main speaker, Miri Maoz-Ovadya, who is the International Desk Director in the Binyamin Regional Council. So Miri, bechavod.
Hi, well, good evening or good afternoon or good morning for each and every one of you for wherever you're logging into this session. We're all very, very excited to participate in this webinar. We've been planning it for a very, very long time. And this is really our best opportunity to try and share stories, everyday life, answer questions regarding the Binyamin region, which we actually all five live at. I'm not an Olah myself. My parents made aliyah 33 years ago from England. They lived shortly in Jerusalem for a few months during Ulpan, and then they moved to Neve Tzuf, which is where I live today. And I work for the regional council, and I'm in charge of encouraging aliyah, which is a big privilege for me. I want to introduce our three speakers, and then we'll maybe break out to watch a short movie about Binyamin. I'll give a general presentation, and then we'll dive into questions and answers. So perhaps let's start with the movie. Okay, Josh, quick clip, just Binyamin region.
250,000 acres, 48 communities, 180 outstanding educational institutions, 80,000 residents. The Binyamin Regional Council, the northern suburbs of Jerusalem, has become a preferred destination for families seeking quality of life and a full community experience in the heartland of Israel. Breathtaking natural landscapes, healthy living. Mishkan Shiloh, Derech HaAvot, and hundreds of archaeological sites in Binyamin tell the story of a vibrant Jewish history. Binyamin region offers a vast and versatile selection of high-level educational institutions, from daycare centers to schools, yeshivot, and more. The region's residents enjoy a wide range of employment options, including local employment centers, as well as proximity to jobs in Jerusalem, Modi'in, and Ariel. The Binyamin Medical Center, a new full-service medical center under development, will serve the entire Binyamin region. The center will provide multifaceted, world-class, advanced, affordable, and accessible medical care. Live in the home of your dreams and enjoy the magnificent surroundings at an affordable price. The Binyamin communities are known as a warm, welcoming, and diverse population, providing substantial support for new immigrants on their path to full and successful absorption.
All the love and the warmth that the people here wrapped upon us gave us the feeling that we're part of a community and that this is the place that we belong.
Join us and become part of the family.
Thank you, Josh. I would like to share my screen to give you a general introduction of the Binyamin region, and then I will introduce our speakers and we'll dive straight into our questions and answers. Okay. So the Binyamin region is right in the center of Israel. While Jerusalem is in our southern border, the Ben Gurion International Airport is very close to most of our western communities, just 25 minutes drive. Tel Aviv is also a very nearby city. Our eastern border is the Jordan Valley, as you can see, and our northern border is Samaria. In Binyamin region, we have 48 communities, and most of them are built as communal. It means that the communities are either small or medium sized or large, with a few hundreds of families living in each of them. And they're based on a community life, on a social life of everybody knowing each other and basing a life together. Most of our communities are outside in the open space, surrounded by beautiful natural views. Our eastern communities are more of a deserty kind of view, like Mitzpeh Yericho. Our western communities are surrounded by natural forests, springs, natural life, and the view within the communities is very rural, okay? Lots of green landscapes and houses and gardens. When we speak about the Binyamin region, we like to look at it as three different parts. We have the communities in the east, which are very, very close to Jerusalem. Most of the population commutes to Jerusalem on a daily basis. It's a very short commute, about 20 minutes or half an hour. In the center of the Binyamin region, we have a lot of people who work also in local areas, industrial zones, shopping markets, a lot of independent people who have their own businesses today in the area. We actually have a beautiful new like a WeWork center where people have their own businesses, graphic designers, lawyers, attorneys that can have their own office very, very close to their house. And the western area, which is very close to the west of Israel, people can commute really anywhere in Israel. People within 45 minutes or an hour drive can get to Modi'in, Petah Tikva, Tel Aviv, Ra'anana, Netanya within an hour and a quarter. So actually the main benefit that we see as living in Binyamin is living in a small community, having your quiet life with your neighbors, surrounded by a very cultural, social environment, but still close enough to commute to the city with everything that you need, whether if it's employment, shopping centers, extended medical services, cultural life. Now during Corona, maybe there's a bit of a more quiet rhythm of life, but thank God, thanks to vaccination, Israel is slowly stepping out of this pandemic, and we can see that things are opening once again all over Israel, which is a very positive thing for us. Binyamin is a very big regional council. We have outspread communities. Some of them are very small, like I said, some are slightly bigger. But out of the 48 communities, we have focused on about 17 communities that are most appropriate for Olim. These communities have quite a nice amount of Anglo Olim that have made aliyah along the years. We have a strong social support for Olim who choose to move to these communities. And there's different options of housing, either rentals, units, apartments, houses, and also a lot of future constructions for people who are looking for a community in which they can build their future and establish a home in the future as well. I wrote a few of the names of the communities in the side. Today we'll be hosting speakers from the 3 different sub-regions in the Binyamin region. We're going to have Aliza speaking to us, who lives in Mitzpeh Yericho, which is in East Binyamin. We have Rachel from Eli, which is right in the center. And we have Ahuva, which lives in West Binyamin in a community called Neriya. All 3 speakers we have today happen to be women. Of course, we also have men who live in Binyamin. And all 3 of our speakers also live in religious communities, but we also have secular and ultra-Orthodox communities as well. So really, there's plenty of different types of communities, different populations, and it's a place where everybody can really find their home.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Miri, but if I remember correctly, Binyamin region is the largest Moatza regional council in the country.
That is true. We have 80,000 residents, which makes us our biggest regional council in Israel. And also the territory is pretty large. If you wish to drive from one side in the most eastern community to the most western community, it would take you about an hour and a half. I know that for some Americans that could be considered a very short distance. For us in Israel, that's a very long drive. But it also means that really we're right in the center. Even in such a large regional council, the drives are pretty short. And a lot of people work in the nearby communities or work in the local industries, like I said. Tourism has been very strong here as well. We have a few claims to fame, not only the fact that we're the largest regional council in Israel, but it's also one of the most touristic attractions that we have here today, with a lot of natural reserves. Ancient Shiloh, which is an amazing heritage site, is right in the center, very close to Eli, where Rachel lives. You may even have a beautiful view on this place as well. And we have almost 1 million tourists a year, both Israeli and international tourists on regular years, that visit all different regions in Binyamin. When it comes to types of housing, I think one of the special things that make a lot of people choose to move to Binyamin is because you can really find your home in the countryside with, like I said, beautiful landscapes, having your own garden and knowing your neighbors, but you're still close enough to the city. And today we have different types of housing in different communities. Some of them are duplexes, we have multi-apartment houses, we have cottages. Of course, the prices range depending on the type of housing, the size of it, and also how close it is to the different centers. Some of the communities we have are very, very close to Jerusalem, communities like Anatot, or Adam, or Tel Zion, which is an ultra-Orthodox community. Of course, the closer you are to the main cities, whether if it's Jerusalem or Modi'in, the prices are slightly higher. And if you're a bit of a longer commute, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, so the prices drop as well. We also have a lot of rental opportunities. Again, it really depends which community you're looking for. So this is just a general introduction. Specific questions can be asked towards the representatives we have from the different communities. So really, when I try to explain to people how is it like to live in a small town in Binyamin, I think maybe the best way to define it is small town living. It's the vibes of living in a small neighborhood. It's sending your child to a school where he has another 30 classmates, or maybe 40 if it's a bigger school. It's living in an environment in which you know that your kids can crossly safe the road and visit their neighbors. And if you're part of a young family, so all the young families hang out in the playground. And if you're part of an elderly family, so you have different elderly clubs in many of these communities. So really this type of small town living is really appropriate for people who are looking for more of a quiet life, for a very close social connection with the people around. We also have some communities which are more urban in their character, communities that have over 600, 700 families, such as Eli, which is more of a maybe big town type of a life. They have a bit more developed services as well, a smaller shopping center. So you can really find whether if it's a small community that interests you or a larger one, we have all different types over here. One of the things that I think are very things attractive for young Olim that we offer over here is an easy start in the first steps that you're taking in Israel in a supportive and friendly environment. Coming to a small town, everybody knows when there's a new family coming in. People are very quick with bringing refreshments and cakes and welcoming you to the community. And when it comes to, especially if you're a family with young kids, and it's very hard to start figuring out what type of schools do you have, what do you do the first day in kindergarten, what type of taxes you have to pay community. Once you live in a small place, you're much more surrounded by people who are welcoming, who are happy to help you, who make sure to welcome you if you're in the grocery store and they notice a new face that they haven't met before. We are also developing a first year program for Olim. As we can see that in the last 2 years, we have a growing amount of Olim coming from English speaking countries. Up until now, we've had a lot of Olim from French countries, Mexico, other countries as well. And we've actually seen that Binyamin has been a growing destination for Anglo Olim. So we're now currently developing a program which will give closer assistance and different systems of support during the first year, which is probably the time in which you really need this type of support. In the community itself, we have local facilities like, of course, the basic ones, a grocery store, post office, library, playground, social activities for different ages, community centers, youth movements, and so on. The bigger the community is, like I said, the larger the services are. And anyway, for many different services, people just prefer to commute to the big city. For example, if you want after-school activities for your kids, there's a few different activities that the community offers. If you want things that are more advanced that your specific community doesn't have, for example, horse riding, you can just drive 20 minutes to the nearby town and have that offered for your children. The religious services are, of course, offered in our religious communities and our traditional communities, such as synagogues, the women's mikveh, Torah learning, and a special service for children, and much more. I just gave the most basic ones. In traditional or in the secular communities, you'll find less religious services, but you'll mostly find a synagogue and the women's mikveh. That's the basics that we do have in most of the communities. Being a community that's part of a large regional council means that we not only have the services offered by the community itself, but also by the larger regional council. We have special departments that accompany different sides of life and offer extended activities for the different parts of the population, whether if it's extended activities for young parents with parenting lessons. We have a club for young mothers who are giving birth and a special program that supports them for the first 2 weeks after birth. We have a special elderly senior club that also operates all over Binyamin with lectures, different tours and days out. And that's also something that's very worthwhile being part of. When it comes to education, that's also one of the strong sides of life in Binyamin. Education here is considered very, very good. A lot of our schools have been winning national awards for their high education levels and for their maybe modern and popular approach to see education in a different way. Maybe not as everybody is, the same in one small system, but there's different types of educational schools that are offered here today. For example, in Binyamin, we have 2 high schools for performing arts, music, professions, and so on. That's something that's pretty unique. It's hard to find in other places in Israel. We also have the special institutions or systems of absorbing children with special needs and integrating them into existing schools as well. Employment, like I said, most of the people just rather commute to the nearby city because that's where you have the largest range of opportunities. But a lot of people just work here within the region, whether if they're educators, if they have their own independent businesses, people who work in tourism, industrial areas, and municipal workers as well. And health, every community has a basic clinic with different services, definitely a family doctor, pediatrician, pharmacies, and more. We have a shopping center called Sha'ar Binyamin, where we have two big advanced medical clinics and one new, very advanced medical clinic, like a small hospital that is being built and hopefully will start operating over the next few years. And that will supply a lot of very important medical services to people living here in the region. So that was on a tip of a finger information, general information about the Binyamin region. We have a website with English information about the different communities, a profile of each of the communities that we suggest for new olim, a bit of background about transportation to the area, employment, education, tourism, of course, if you want to come and get to know the area before you make the big choice to come and move here. I think that's probably something that's definitely worthwhile once it's possible to start traveling to Israel. So let me stop sharing my screen. Second. I'll move on to introducing our speakers for today. So first is our speaker, Aliza Pilichovsky. Aliza, you want to wave? So Aliza was born in San Diego, California. She made aliyah from Boca Raton, Florida, and moved to Mitzpeh Richo at 2014. She and her husband, Uri, have 6 children in the ages 12 to 21. She works as a hospice chaplain and is the head of Mitzpeh Richo's elected leadership. Thank you, Aliza, for joining us. Ahuva Davis made aliyah from Baltimore 5 years ago. Ahuva, let's see you. You want to wave? Great. Ahuva and her husband have 2 girls that were born in the States, two girls that were born in the States and 2 boys that were born in Israel. They first made aliyah to Ramat Beit Shemesh, and a year and a half ago, they moved to the community Neriah, which is located in the west of Binyamin. Ahuva has a master's degree in special education, but is currently home with her children. Her husband owns a technology development company. Ahuva has a sister in Neriah, and they have a shared custody of their brother, who is 15-year-old with Down syndrome. Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Rachel Van Koningsberg was born in Texas, USA. She made aliyah in 2020 and has lived in Eli since October 2020 with her husband. Rachel is actually newlywed, and she had a very unique Corona wedding, which took place in Eli, one of the most beautiful viewpoints in Israel. And actually, after she made aliyah, she was followed by her parents, who made aliyah to Eli as well. Rachel is a registered nurse and is the creator of the blog myaliyahstory.com. We'll make sure to send you the link. She writes beautifully about her experiences, and it's very worthwhile following her. I would like to give each of our speakers a quick opportunity to share a few words about the community where they live in. Aliza, let's start with you. Can you tell us a bit about Mitzpeh Richo?
Sure. Just before Aliza, if you don't mind, I just would like to remind everybody, the Q&A section is where you should be asking your questions if you have them. We're answering them as we go. There are a few questions that are sitting in the box on purpose, and we will touch on them later on when we get to questions and answers. I see a few of them are repeating themselves. So if you haven't received an answer, you will get an answer later on in this session. Aliza, please.
Okay, so I will talk to you about Mitzpeh from our perspective and what drew us to Mitzpeh and what we love about Mitzpeh. So we were looking for a community that is close to Yerushalayim, but is still a community. We were coming from Boca Raton, Florida, in the United States, and before that in Los Angeles, and we were very involved in shul life there, and that was important to us to be in a very close-knit community. So we checked out the education here. The schools were excellent, and there are we have all of Mitzvah and all of Yerushalayim to choose from in terms of schooling. That was the most important to us. The community itself is mostly Israeli. There are Americans. We're very generous with what we call Anglo here. Our Anglo community is 20%, but again, generous. These aren't 20% that have just made Aliyah within the past 2 years. These are people that speak English, which is a great support. And we've been all of what we wanted and more has come true for us. Our children adjusted quickly to Mitzvah Yericho life and to Israel in general. And my husband actually works from home, but I'm able to travel into Yerushalayim for work, and we're able to get a lot done here. And of course, like we said at the outset, the people. But but for real, like we did feel like the people are the right people for us. It's an Orthodox community, and that being said, there's a large amount of diversity amongst that. So you will see people on Shabbat that don't keep Shabbat exactly the way that we do, and both to either extreme, however you want to define that. You will see people, and to us, that's very important. Coming from a big tent shuls in America, that was something that was important to us. So we do feel like we have that here, and I'm sure that everybody has beautiful things to say about the people in their community. But for us, the people here, it does work for us. So that's Mitzvah in a nutshell. And in terms of services, like Miri said, we have most basic services within the Yishuv, and we're a 10-minute drive to Ma'ale Adumim is our biggest city, and a 12-minute drive to Hadassah Har Tzofim, and all major Yerushalayim amenities.
Thank you, Aliza. Ahuva, would you like to give some words about Neria, where you live in?
So we made Aliyah from Baltimore, which is a pretty nice sized community, and we're in Ramat Beit Shemesh, which is also a big city. And we were looking for a smaller community that our kids could really integrate into Israeli life because they are stuck with American parents. We wanted to give them more opportunities to meet Israelis and become part of the society here. We didn't want to be too far away from a big city. And we found excellent schools here. We found a really warm and welcoming community. I think all the panelists are going to say very similar things on this one. We wanted a really, really warm community where we could be part of it. We could contribute to the community, and our kids could build relationships with their friends and their neighbors. We are close to Modi'in. We are close to Kiryat Sefer, Modi'in Elite. And it's a really, really warm place to be. So, and the schools here are excellent. We have a wonderful health clinic on the Yishuv. And if you need more services, Modi'in is not far away, like I said. And yeah, we're very happy here.
Thank you, Uva. Rachel?
Hi, everyone. So I just made Aliyah September of 2020, so last year. I moved to Eli in October. And with the pandemic and everything going on, it kind of makes Aliyah and social integration a little bit different. But I'm so glad that we went ahead and we came to the community that we did. My husband already knew a couple of people here, and warmth just takes it to a whole new level here. And like, even though things are different with social distancing and closures and lockdowns, everyone is so warm and is always asking if there's anything we need. They're always checking up on us. I also got married here. It's the most beautiful place, I think, in all of Israel. It's mostly Dati Leumi, but there's also like Haredi, Chabad, some secular presence as well. Interestingly, you don't have to be interviewed and really accepted to get into the community of Eli. Pretty much as long as you don't have a criminal history, they'll let you come and move here. it's not an American bubble, but there are more and more English speakers I'm seeing in the stores here and just on the street talking. Super affordable. We have lots of security here. We have 2 health clinics, Maccabi and Clalit. We have 2 Magen David Adom ambulances here. We have so many doctors here of different specialties, post office, like pretty much anything you think you might need, Eli has it. And if you don't like the big town vibe, Eli is actually spread over 5 hilltops. So you have the main 2 hills and then 3 more satellite hills that are more out there and more further out, and you feel a lot more isolated if that's your vibe. And it pretty much is the best of both worlds. 40-minute drive to Jerusalem, 20-minute drive to Ariel. I could keep going on and on about it. I have a whole blog post on my page about Eli if you want to know more. But yeah, don't want to take up too much time.
So we actually have quite a few questions already coming in from the audience, but I do want to start with maybe one general question and refer it to all 3 speakers, and then we'll start taking questions from the crowd. So moving to a small community in Binyamin is not like moving to Ra'anana or Netanya or Ramat Beit Shemesh like Ahuva experienced. And I think some people here already wrote that they want to hear why you chose to leave Ramat Beit Shemesh and move to Binyamin. So maybe if each of you can share something that people are less familiar with about living in a small town living, and why is that something that you find so recommended? And maybe let's start with Eliza.
So as I said before, coming from the communities that we were in America, shul was a real center of our lives, and you know the synagogue really created that Jewish community, a Jewish community center. You know, which we had in many of towns that I grew up in, was a place where we gathered together. And coming to Israel and moving to a big city, you can get lost. And you know, like it's very exciting today. You know, I work in Yerushalayim, and it was so exciting driving through the streets and feeling Purim, you know, on every street corner, and everything's decorated for Purim. But at the same time, where do we as a family go for all of those things and for all of our needs? And that's something that you get in a yeshuv, that, and you know, specifically in Mitzvah for us, that is something that we really got. The other thing, somebody was talking about special ed, and you know, I think, you know, one of my kids has some special learning needs, and the school that she goes to, the teacher there, one of the teachers said to me one day, she said, you know, you should just know that people say that our school is for children with special needs. And she said, you know why? Because every single child has special needs. And it's an approach to education that you know, that certain people have. But for kids that really do have you know, special needs, I'm sorry, I forgot the word that was so beautiful that somebody had used, but for an out-of-town community, there's a certain aspect of inclusion that naturally happens. So because the schools are public schools, we have the breadth to be able to include all students. So you know, when we have children with physical differences, we have children with you know, all kinds of differences that are all included within the school. We have children, you know, where you can see their learning differences, and children that you can't. And it's amazing to really be a part of that inclusion, and for all children to be able to understand that everyone needs to be a part of the community. And you know, we have it for, you know, in the Binyamin region, we have for gifted students, and we have for children that need more help in different areas. And that's something that's really beautiful in a smaller type of community. But Ahuva and Rachel will be able to expand more.
Thank you, Eliza. Rachel?
Well, I feel like you know, I always visited Israel a lot over the years before making aliyah, and I always kind of found myself in the Jerusalem, Tel Aviv scene, and I didn't really feel very close to the communities there. You're kind of more anonymous, and when you're new to a country, you're new to the culture, and you're new to the language, it's not necessarily a good thing. You want to be somewhere where you have a support system in place, and that's doubly true if you don't have any family here. So I think moving to a smaller community where you do know your neighbors and you have someone to rely on if you need, or even something as simple as paying your bills. You don't understand what the bill says, can go to your neighbor and ask for help, and they'll help you. They'll gladly help you. And I think that's really important, but also, especially when you have children, just raising them in an environment where they feel very comfortable. And another benefit to living here is a lot more greenery and open space, and just being able to be kids and play, and not be stuck in a concrete jungle, and actually being able to go outside and get sunlight, I think is a wonderful childhood to have. There's pros and cons to both, for sure. And ultimately the decision is what's best for you and your family. But for me, that was being here.
Thank you, Rachel. And Ahuva, perhaps if you can answer this as well.
All right, just unmuting. So we wanted a community where we felt like we could know our neighbors, and like Rachel said, be outside, sunlight, grass, and trees. We really missed the grass and trees living in a big city. And just really being able to go outside on Shabbat, you go to the parks, you know everyone there, or at least you recognize their faces, and you really feel like people care about you. You're not just kind of lost in the crowd. I think I answered someone's question about in the Q&A about what it means to be part of a warm and welcoming community. So when a new family moves in, they're assigned a welcome family who arranges meals for them for a week, Shabbat meals for the first few weeks. After you give birth, you have meals sent in. Teenagers in the community volunteer a few hours a week to help with your other children. And you really feel like people are looking out for you. And I think for Olim coming without family or with very limited family in Israel, it's really important to have that sense of community, that if you're going through a hard time, people are going to step up to you and people are going to help. And when you're in a place of giving, you want to give back to your neighbors as well. So I think that is kind of, in a nutshell, what it means to be part of a warm, welcoming community where you can contribute and there's a give and take between all the neighbors. It's not uncommon on our street WhatsApp at 2 o'clock in the morning before a Chag, hey, who has eggs, who's awake? And you'll get 4 answers. And don't worry about paying us back. Next time we need to borrow something, we're going to come to you. So I think that sense of community, that sense almost of like family. So I think that's a really important aspect. I know for us personally as Olim, having that support system in place for us.
Thank you, Ahuva. I'm going to take some of the general questions and try and answer them together. And then maybe we'll move on to the more personal questions. I'll give maybe one general answer and then move on to the next one. In Binyamin, like I said, we have religious, secular, mixed communities, traditional and Orthodox. In most of these communities, families of different statuses and stages can find themselves. There were quite a few questions about senior families. So for senior families or retired couples, I would anyway recommend to try and look for one of the communities that are closer to Modi'in or Jerusalem, the ones that are 20 minutes drive, that have different options of housing. Maybe apartments are a bit more relevant for a couple in that stage of life. I think that's maybe best to try and answer individually, because it really depends what are the focuses that you're looking for in this stage of retiree. And I'll just answer quickly a question about prices. So the prices really change on different communities. You can find apartments for rental at around $800 a month or $1,000 a month if they're big apartments. The housing prices Maybe Nathan can help me with the dollar rates. The houses here, I'll say in shekels, and Nata will help with the dollars. Houses here change in prices. If you want to purchase a new house, there's plenty of new projects in different communities, either apartments, houses with gardens are a bit harder to find and the prices are higher, but the prices range for around 1 million shekels for an apartment, and they can go all the way up to 2.5 million shekels if it's a house with a garden. Nata, the equivalent of dollars would be?
Right now, the dollar's a little less than 3.5. So if let's say we're going with a 2 million shekels, so it'll be 550,000 for something like that. But obviously, like Miri said, there is a large range of types of units, whether we're talking about apartments, whether it's homes with gardens, larger, smaller, depends on the community. If it's a little further from a central area, so it could. Yeah.
For most people, anyway, because aliyah is such a big move, we anyway advise to rent first, to try out the community, see how you feel, and then most people buy at a second stage. But if some people here are interested in buying directly, so yes, there's quite a few projects that are being built today in different communities.
I can say that from my experience of purchasing a house on a shuv here in West Binyamin, I remember when I bought my house a couple of years ago, I paid under 1 million shekels. So that's like $300,000. And people were buying the same size houses in Modi'in, Yerushalayim for 3-4 times the amount, which was shocking to people. There were questions in the questions and answers box before about, do you need to have a car or not? So again, that also depends on the community. If you're in a community that has more public transportation or less. But on the other hand, if we're going back to the pricing, in many cases, it would be worth living a little further out. You could call it a little further out in the shuvim, and buying purchasing an apartment or a home for a lot less than you would in a city, and then having the expense of a car. But that's a decision that every family would have to make amongst themselves. Some families have 2 cars, some have none. And again, also because these are very close-knit communities, at least most of them, most times in the morning, you'll see many of the people who live in the yishuv standing at the entrance waiting to try to hitch a ride with people, and their neighbors will pull up and just take them to work. And that's considered an acceptable mode of transportation. And it's not something that, first of all, you should feel like you're trying to schnorr off people and trying to save a buck on public transportation. It's just the way that things happen here. And I see that as a positive thing. I think that that's something that strengthens the community. And as the question came up before about a warm and welcoming community, if at 2:00 in the morning you can ask for eggs or sugar, you can also put out a message at 10:00 at night. Is anybody driving tomorrow to Jerusalem, Tel Aviv? I see WhatsApp messages by us, from time to time. Is anybody driving all the way to the Golan tomorrow? And people will find rides, whether it's halfway or the whole way. But people are just always available to help out their neighbors. They're even in our area where Ahuva and I live. We live in neighboring Yishuvim. There are 4 or 5 communities here that are right near each other, and there are also WhatsApp groups within the general area, not specific to a Yishuv. So those are also just things that the Yishuvim do share community aspects between themselves as well. So that's something that also people would want to take into consideration if they're looking for a smaller, more quiet area, but that has more resources at their disposal.
Just to answer one other question, we actually, if I had to give another definition between two types of communities here, we have smaller communities which have some kind of a welcoming process for new families, especially now during Corona times in which you're limited in coming and physically visiting. So mostly there would be some kind of a Zoom meeting with representatives of the community, obviously with English speaking communities, some kind of virtual tour. if you have the possibility of coming to Israel, when it does happen, so often families come for a Shabbat to check out the community and get to know the place before they make their decision to move there. In the bigger communities, which are more urban character, like Eli, where Rachel lives, you can have a conversation with the Olim coordinator, but basically there's not much of a reception process because it's more like a small town or small city, perhaps an Israeli scale. So people just make their own kind of visit, and they can just choose to live once they find an apartment or a house, they move in. There's no proper process like is more acceptable in the smaller communities. Maybe just
Miri,
yeah.
I just want to ask you if you can share. I see a lot of questions about, first of all, if there are new housing projects, where people can find more information because we can't, do pilot trips now. Where can they see more about the Yishuvim? Can you expand a little bit about what is on the website, the Binyamin Regional Council website? I had mentioned in a few of my answers that there's some videos and some more information, but can you just give a little bit more about what's on the website so people know what they can find there?
So sure. So first of all, of course, we have a map of the Benjamin region, and you can find the communities that interest you. We've tried to narrow it down to 17 communities that you will find on the Making Aliyah page. Those are the communities that we find most relevant for new Olim because they have a certain amount of English Olim that already live there and social support. Each of these communities has a profile page giving a sense of how the community is like. Is it religious, secular? What type of facilities? What's the nearby city for people to commute and work out? So that's the basic information that you would have. There's a page about transportation. And when it comes to housing, some communities have building projects that already are relevant today to buy, or maybe will be finished in the summer or next year. So when you click within the rest of this week, we'll make sure to update it and put some more links into the relevant construction companies that have information in English and can supply more information about prices and the types of housing. Like I said, the houses that are being built today mostly are either duplexes or multiple apartment houses. Of course, the apartments are much cheaper than buying duplexes, which are less and less common, especially since we're speaking about such a centric area in Israel. So finding a house that is still affordable is definitely something that is positive, but is getting harder and harder to find. Also, the Israeli market is building, building higher buildings than smaller houses like we used to in the past. But on an individual level, we'll give you out our contact information, and I'm happy to send you directly to pages of communities that could be relevant for you, whether if you're looking for a small community or a secular community or a place that is very close to the nearby city. We're happy to answer individual questions after this webinar is finished.
Okay, so we actually have, I think, one more question that we would like to ask our panelists. And this would, I think, conclude our webinar. I'm going to ask each of you, and I'll call you out by name, if you can share a funny aliyah experience. If that aliyah experience is related in any way to the yishuv that you live in, then you get extra points for that. But if not, then that's also okay. So let's start with Ahuva.
So my aliyah story actually happened recently, and it is kind of related to moving to our yishuv because we needed to update a paper from our 2.0 for our mortgage because we thankfully just signed on a house here in area. So I needed to update our 2.0. And I went into the office in Yerushalayim after many emails back and forth trying to find the right office that I needed to go to. And I walked in to find many new Olim sitting there for hours and hours waiting to find the appropriate person to speak to. And after about 10 minutes, it was my turn, and I walked into the person I was meeting with. And she told me that I then needed to leave and go to a different office across the hall to speak to the person there. And I very forcefully and more Israeli-like than American-like told her that I'm not going to cut the line, everyone who's been waiting, but I really don't have all day to wait. And I just need to update this one little thing in my time. And she quickly ran out to the other office, got it stamped and brought it back to me. And she said, I could tell you've been here for more than a few weeks. Definitely have some Israeliness in you. I said, yes, we've been here for 5 years now. So we feel like we finally made it because we're able to accomplish those kind of tasks now.
Very nice. Not everybody can do those in only 5 years, so good for you. Rachel.
Well, when we made aliyah, my husband and I were looking for a place to have our wedding and a place to live after we got married. And we were looking at apartments on Yad Shtaim, and we came across an apartment in Eli. And my husband has a friend, a very close friend of his that lives here. And we figured we'd go check it out. You know, there's other apartments in other places in the Shomron, especially Ariel we were looking into very closely, but we came to Eli first. And immediately we fell in love with the community, the yeshuv, and the apartment itself. And we walked out of the apartment. We was shown by the landlord. We're like, okay, well, we think we know we want to live here, but let's think about it a little bit. And we met with my husband's friend, and he took us on a tour all over the yeshuv. He had a car, so we drove around. He took us to the place where we would later decide to get married. And then he took us to have coffee at a local rabbi's house, a rabbi of the Mechina, actually, over here. And that rabbi turned out to be the rabbi who would later marry us. And this rabbi was talking to us about the apartment that we found. And we kept looking at each other and we're like, yeah, I think this is the apartment. I think this is going to be the one. So the rabbi was like, no, get the landlord on the phone. I'm going to speak to him in Hebrew and like work this out for you. And turns out the landlord is also a rabbi. And we actually signed for the apartment that day. So the same day that we came to Eli, we like looked at everything, and that day we signed. I recommend anyone signing for an apartment to have a lawyer look at the lease first before signing. We didn't do that, but so far we've been very lucky. But yeah, it's kind of like you know, I've always been prepared. Like I've always liked thinking things very through in America, but coming here to Israel is kind of just go with the flow and do things as the Israelis do. And so far it's worked out for us.
Very nice. That sounds like a very efficient trip.
Extremely.
Thanks for sharing. Aliza.
So I very much identify with Rachel and Ahuva's stories. You know, I think every single day as an Ola, and you know, I'm a veteran Ola sitting here on this panel because I've been here for almost 7 years. But every day is really an experience. You know, you hear a new word and you're like, what's that? And you know, you laugh and you chuckle as you go through your day. But for me, one that sticks out is when we first moved here. One of my children got lost on their way home from school. So first of all, you know, coming from America, you would never let your child walk to school by themselves. So that in and of itself is already a novelty. And she was walking home and she got lost. And she didn't speak a word of Hebrew. And she starts crying, and somebody sees her crying on the street, and she's like, oh, Ata Amerikaya Hadasha, you're the new American. And she said, yes. And she starts crying. And of course, because it's a yeshuv, and even, I mean, we're one of the larger yeshuvim. We have 480 families, but you know, the new American, they quickly brought her to the house. She walks in, she was 3 houses away from our house, but it was so obvious that of course this is where we live. And she came home and wiped away her tears. She already had a chocolate in her hands from the neighbor. And that's really what aliyah is about. And you know, they're funny stories and we have them every day, but it's really like, my husband writes a lot on Facebook, and he talks about living the dream. And there, you know, it's true that for every living the dream story, there's also a living the nightmare story, and there are challenges. But really, every single day, you can look up and say, "Wow, we're really living the dream." It really is absolutely incredible. And these funny stories are so incredible and really just a part of our lives. And thank God.
Thank you for sharing. I love hearing these things. I hear many of these throughout my day. In general, I just follow a lot of people's aliyah stories. I help a lot of people resolve their issues and allow them to live their dream and not their nightmare. But still, every time I hear these little stories, it makes me feel a little bit better. And I'm always amused to hear the things that people see as these like funny experiences when in the end even the Israelis, I myself am an Ole, but as when I was 7 years old, Miri didn't make Aliyah. I'm sure that when she goes to, or when I go to a government office or some random office building, we have no idea where to go or where to look. And you just ask, I don't know, the security guard or the guy in the office next door, and everybody's always just happy to help. Even if you have a grumpy guy every so often, most people are happy to help. So thank you for sharing your experiences. And Miri, if you'd like to have any last comments before we close up, that would be great.
Yeah, I would like to add that the website has a lot of great movies that were done about the different communities. Ahuva and Aliza are both starring in the movies that were done about their communities. And we're going to also have some in-depth stories of specific olim in which you can hear more of a specific person and their aliyah experiences. I think getting to know from a person who's done that move and has gone through the dreams and the nightmares, like Aliza said, is probably the best way of understanding how does it look like and maybe what would it be for you. And definitely, I'm sure that our three speakers, as well as myself and Nata, would be very, very happy to answer any of your questions, to refer you to the relevant information that we have, whether if it's on our website or to the relevant people within the council or the contact people in the Yishuvim. Each of the Yishuvim has a contact person who's an English speaker, and we'll be more than happy to expand and tell you a bit more about what you want to know about their specific Yishuvim. It was great to see so many questions here. I feel like I didn't really manage to answer them all great questions, and we'll be more than happy to answer you in person and continue this contact and help you make the right decision for you and your family.
Amazing. Thank you again. This was tremendous. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much to Miri for hosting with me. Thank you to Aliza and Ahuva and Rachel for being our panelists and for sharing your experiences and showing people what Binyamin is all about. And thank you to all of you for joining us. We're more than happy to be in touch with every one of you. And we hope that this gave you a little bit of a glimpse into what life in Binyamin is all about. And obviously, thank you so much to Josh Sussman, who is in the background, being our techie and helping with sharing links and information. He will be sending out a follow-up email with resources and links and our contact information. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. And thank you so much for joining.